I recall one very beautiful incident that happened again soon after we had joined as students. There was this one classmate of mine. In fact, we were in the same room. The two of us, we were roommates, right? And one week, he fell very sick. He could not even attend darshan. And Swami, he was one of Swami's favorite boys. Swami used to call him for some reason Delhi Bull. He was actually a tall, very thin person, but Swami used to call him as Delhi Bull. And Swami loved him very much. Every single day, Swami would talk to him. And one week, he could not come to darshan at all. He recovered, and the evening that he recovered, he told me, Hari, let's just go and check my weight. So the two of us, we went to the dispensary. We checked his weight, it was 68 kgs. And in that dispensary, at that moment, only the two of us were there. And I remember that, it was 68 kgs. Next day, we went to Kulwant Hall in the evening. And then Swami looks at him, he says, oh, you have come. On bright smile. And then Swami calls him and he says, where were you all these days? He said, Swami, I was really sick. I had fever. I couldn't come at all. Then Swami immediately called the warden of the hostel and he started telling him, you're not taking care of the boys at all. See, this boy, he's come from North India and you should be giving him chapati. You're giving him rice and rasam. So that is why he has fallen sick. Make sure to give him more chapatis. And then Swami turns to this boy. He says, you have lost weight. What is your weight now? And my brother, he thought over what to answer because he just saw his warden being raked over the coals. So he decided to save him. He said, Swami, my weight is 70 kgs. Immediately Swami said, hey, jhoot bolta hai. You're speaking a lie. Swami said 68 kgs and my jaw, I was sitting a few lines, it just dropped. There were only two people who knew what his weight was. And that was, of course, the Delhi Bull and myself. And then here Swami is revealing that even he knew. A few weeks later, it was my chance to get this kind of revelation. Swami, it was a very, very beautiful moment. Swami had called me and he started speaking to me. He was asking me, so what did you study before you came here? How are you finding the MBA? Are you comfortable? He was asking questions of that sort. And I thought this is a very great opportunity for me to pop that one question which was very strongly rotating in my mind. You see, at that time, my mother, she was suffering from rheumatoid arthritis. Almost 6 or 7 years, she had been suffering from that disease. And as many of you know, it is, degenerative. It never cures. It just gets worse and worse as the time passes. And by the time I had joined as a student, she was almost bedridden. Hardly she could walk. And I recall, when I used to study in Chennai, whereas my parents were in Hyderabad. So when the holidays would start, the semester holidays would start, I would come home. First thing I would go and press her wrist. I'd press it to see when she would react. And sometimes if you just touch, there used to be a lot of pain. She would say, like to say that it's paining. Sometimes I would be encouraged, you could press it a little more and there would be no pain. And uppermost in my mind was, I know of only one person who can cure my mother and that is Swami. So I decided this is a good time to tell Swami. So I just said one sentence. I said, Swami, my mother is sick. And Swami said, I know. And then he went on to say, you see, first, when you went to the doctor, they told you it is rheumatism. I said, yes, Swami. And then later they changed the diagnosis to arthritis. I said, yes, Swami. Finally, they told it is rheumatoid arthritis. I said, yes, Swami. And then Swami told, suddenly he switched to Hindi. Idhar dard hota hai na? He asked. And I just had no more words. Because I knew that all those years, Swami was literally there, watching the whole set of events unfolding. And the only words that could come out of my mouth were like, Swami, you know everything. And when I said this, my hands were cupped like this. And then Swami like just as you would high-five a teenager, he just hit my hand. He said, "Yes, I know." That was like one very, very beautiful moment where, as they say, the veils of divinity part, you see God for who He is. Then Swami said, "You call your mother, I will speak to her." And within 2 weeks, Swami called us for an interview, just my mother and I. And this is one interview I can really never forget. My very first chance to be in the immediate presence of Bhagwan and alone. Just my mother and I, we were there for the interview in the personal interview room. Before that, there was, many of you may know this, that the interview room actually has 2 quarters. So one is where he calls all the people whom he has called for the interview, they sit. And then there is a private interview room where individually then he would call the families to speak to them. So first we were seated outside. All this was completely new to me. And the only instruction I had from the warden was that you are Swami student, you have to be seated in front. And I, with my burly figure, I moved everybody and plonked myself right in front of Swami's seat. And Bhagwan came, he smiled at me, he sat over there. And, as the interview progressed, there was one guard of Swami's residence who was seated over there. And Swami told me, he said, he has this 3-diamond ring, very similar to what I have. Swami said, ask him to give it to me. So I asked him for the ring, and Swami said, look at it. I said, yes, Swami, it is like you described. And I gave it to Swami. Swami said, he wants to be free of the planetary influences. So what ring should I give him? Luckily, I had done my course reading very well, and from Kasturiji's writings, I knew the ring that Swami was describing. And I said, Swami, I think the Navaratna ring is what you are speaking about. And Swami said, yes. So I will change this ring into the Navaratna ring. And Swami said, see, look at it. I said, yes, Swami. And this was done, at least there were 10-15 people there seated in the interview room. So Swami started blowing on it. He said, he would blow on it, show me. So he said, ek gaya, do gaya, teen gaya. Like this, he said 9 times, no gaya, and he showed it to me. And when he showed it to me, it was still the three diamond ring. It was a ring set with 3 diamonds. And the engineer in me, it couldn't stop. And I said, I was about to point out that it has not changed. Hardly had the words come out of my mouth, in front of me, that small little ring suddenly expanded into a square ring with 9 gemstones embedded in it. And I still cannot forget, even as I speak right now, in my mind's eye, I can see not only the square-shaped ring, but around it a small wispy, smoky border, as if just at that moment it was created, manufactured, red hot. And Swami took that ring and gave it to this very, very lucky guard of the Purnachandra residence. And then, of course, Swami, he assured my mother. He told her, in your life, you never need to take any more medicines. Swami created Vibhuti, gave it to her, and he told her every day, mix it in water and have every day as your medicine. He also took out a few Vibhuti sachets. He gave it to her, then he gave a few to me, and he said, this is all the medicine that you need. And just as Swami said, after that my mother never took any medicine for her arthritis. And to let you know how the story ended, about 5 or 6 years later, Swami had gone to Kodaikanal. One of my younger brothers, he was very fortunate to accompany Swami. After he came back from Kodaikanal, he told me this very interesting sight. That is, he said, I saw your mother, in Kodaikanal. And one day Swami had gone out, and of course all the students had followed. And he was in one of the jeeps just behind Swami's car. And he said, I looked out of the car, I saw your mother was running beside Swami's car. And, the tears that rolled out, because just 5 years before, this was a lady who was bedridden, who could hardly walk. And now I'm hearing that she is running. She is able to run beside Swami's car. Nobody else can perform such a miracle. Completely written off by doctors. There is no science that can explain how a regenerative disease gets cured. But there it was. So in this way, Swami, in very, very little ways, he shows that how he is present there all the time. There is nothing that is not known to him. There is no power that is not in his hand. There is nothing you can say that Bhagwan cannot do this. And there is no time when he is not present. At all the times, he is there always with us.